Welcome to Tentative Title with Tim. This is a podcast about creativity, about process, about filmmaking, and about screenwriting. Welcome, everybody. Let's get into it. So today's topic is about how I start a screenplay. So, ideas come from everywhere, and you never know when something is going to hit you with some great idea. You're watching TV, you're taking a walk outside, you watch a movie, listen to a podcast. Something very insignificant could set off an idea. And so what do you do with that idea? Sometimes you have a vision in your head of a scene or a character or some kind of scenario, and that's a very exciting time to have this brand new idea because it's such a promising moment in which it could become something that is, one of the greatest stories that you could be telling at this point because you're so excited about it. It's a new idea. But then how do you take that idea and how do you turn it into a screenplay? It doesn't have to be a screenplay, but I always have my mind set on turning it into some kind of visual medium because most of the time my mind is geared towards ideas that can be turned into something like a television show or like a movie. So when that happens, I start with writing it down. I open up a document. I have this structure that I set up where even if I get the very basic details down on a page, it's already structured in a way that leads me to develop the idea more. There have been plenty of years when I've had an idea, wrote it down, and then I come back to it not knowing what the heck I was talking about. It was some scribble of something, and there's no indication of what it was supposed to be. So this process that I've started is that I open up a Word document, and I have a list of different sections that I fill out to help me take that idea that is nebulous and to start chipping away at it and making it more precise. So I start with obviously a tentative title. If I don't have a title, I just say untitled because that's something that will develop as the idea develops. Sometimes I have a title right away. Other times it's a struggle to get to a title even after the entire script is done. Sometimes I have no idea what it is that I want to call the movie or the TV show or whatever the idea ends up being. I don't want to say that I'm like great at titles because I don't actually think I am. It's one of the things that I struggle with because I always try to find titles that are suggestive of what the story is about, but also has layers of meaning to it as well. And sometimes it doesn't have to, it just has to be very straightforward. And I have trouble just breaking it down to that very simple concept. But that's besides the point. We can get into titles later, but right now I'm just talking about when you have an idea and the process of developing it. So from there, I go to the next section, which is the genre. What is this going to be? Is it a horror? Is it a thriller? Is it a rom-com? Is it a comedy? Is it drama? What is it? Well, what is this image in my head? What is this story that I'm thinking of? What is this character that I've been inspired by? What is this exactly? And that helps to define it even more because then you start to think in that sandbox of that genre and helps you to develop the story because your mind is already gearing up to think in that way. And sometimes it's a mix of genres, which like I'm a big fan of because sticking directly with one genre sometimes can be a bit boring, but genre is there for a reason. It's there to define a story and be kind of a shorthand for whatever story you're trying to tell. So from there, I go to the next section, which is format. What is it? Is it a movie? Is it a TV show? Is it a skit? Is it a short film? What exactly is this? And sometimes you don't know, but most of the time, when you have an idea, you have a pretty good fix on what it is, just from the character or from the scene. There's some indication before you even start writing of what you want this idea to be. And it doesn't have to stay that way. You might find that as you're developing the idea that you wanted it to be a feature film, but you find that there's more story there, which means that it probably should be a TV show. So stuff like that happens all the time, and this document is constantly changing because of the information that is developing as you develop the story. So it's there to help you define what the idea is without having to put in too much work into actually writing a treatment or starting with writing the script. The next section that I focus on is the logline. Some writers start with a logline, others don't write a logline until they've finished the script and they know what the story is going to be. That is something that I sometimes start with a logline, and other times I don't know exactly what it is until much later. But at least in terms of like trying to develop the idea, I'll write some vague logline to help me define who the character is, who the main character is and what they want, what exactly they're up against. And that will change as well. As you develop the story, you'll find that a character that you thought was going to be the main character no longer is, and so you can go back and change the logline to fit what the story actually is. And this logline can be extremely vague as well. Sometimes I'll have a logline that doesn't have any character names. It's just some guy is up against a corporation that is trying to take the land of his great ancestor, and so he goes to court and, blah, 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 blah. That's just a off the top of my head kind of, drama logline or whatever. So I'll start with that. And even with something very vague, it gets your mind on working on not only how to sell the story, because when you have a logline, that's your pitch to whoever is going to read the script, but it's also to help you get excited about the idea when you're not when you're lost with it, or when you're not too excited about it. You can come back to it and remember that was the initial point of the idea in the first place. So that's something that is changing over time, but it doesn't have to necessarily be changing as you're developing the story. That can be something that you come back to when it's time to send it out to people, and you refine it so that you can send it out with your script. And right after that is the synopsis area. Now I kind of get this mixed up with treatment. I end up writing a synopsis that turns into a treatment, and that's something that I toggle between, because eventually you're going to need to write a synopsis at one point if you're going to submit it somewhere. And so you can write a synopsis and have that ready to go. But usually I'm so excited about developing the story that I just start going into treatment mode and I start laying out all the beats of the story. And so it's a section that is a bit looser because you can start to plot out the how the story goes and what the scenes are and stuff like that. And that's really, for me, it's because I'm impatient and really want to get the story down so that I can start to write the screenplay. Now, it's very easy to think that in the middle of writing this synopsis treatment that you know what the story's going to be, and you might have thought of what the ending was even before you started writing. But I urge everybody to finish a synopsis, finish a treatment before going into writing a screenplay. I've fell into the trap of thinking that I knew where the story was going, and I started writing the script, and when I got to the end of where I had dropped off from the treatment, I had no idea where to take the story from there. And it took me a little while. Eventually I would come back to that script and figure out where to take it, but that was just some unnecessary rush that I didn't need to do concerning that script. So yeah, I urge everybody to figure out what your story is before you go in to writing the script. Now, I've also done the opposite of that, which is not figuring out any of this stuff and just started writing a script anyway. And that is kind of helps, but not really, because you do spend a lot of time after the fact, once you've written the first draft, going back and trying to track everything in the script that needs to be changed, and it's a big pain overall. So I do recommend trying to figure everything out beforehand before even writing fade in on your script. And the next part of the document that I sometimes use, but not always, is that I'll put a character description. I'll start to figure out who is part of the story, what their relationship is to the other characters. It is helpful in the long run, and it's something that I should probably do more often. But like I said before, I don't always do that because I'm so excited about what the story is, or the story is more plot driven than it is concerned with character. But when it is important to have a backstory for all these characters, I'll take a section and I'll give the characters names, and I'll start to figure out what their relationship is to one another. And this as well feeds into the what you do in the synopsis and what you do in the treatment, and then eventually in the log line and all that. So all these things are constantly changing, and I've developed characters and their backstories, and that has helped to define their actions in the story, which has been extremely helpful in some ways. And I'll find that maybe the backstory is actually the story that needs to be told instead of the actual story that I'm telling or trying to tell. And the great thing about all of this is that you can change everything on this document, and it's not going to waste a lot of time. You could end up creating other characters that you never even use in the script because they just don't fit anywhere. Or you may find that the main character that you wanted to follow just isn't that interesting anymore, and there's a side character that has a way more interesting backstory that is the story that you were trying to tell. So all of this you wouldn't be able to find necessarily in starting to write the script, because you would start with the character that you had in your head and you would follow them, and then you might get 40 pages in and realize that the story is not actually about them, but this other character that you want it to be a side character, but actually is the main character. Now that's the basic structure of the document. I sometimes put other areas such as references. If there's a movie that has a character or a plot that's similar to what I'm trying to write, I will put that down as something that I should watch. If there's a book, if there's anything that already exists that's going to help me further define the story, I'll write those down so that I can seek them out and watch them or read them or what have you. And then there's sections where if I've written a part of the story that I really think is going to be useful in the future, but I don't exactly know where it's going to fit, I have a little section at the bottom that I call extra bits, and I'll just copy and paste down to that section. Sometimes I'll take portions of the script and copy and paste them into that document as well. Although with a lot of screenwriting software, they already have a section where it's like a scrap page that you can copy and paste sections of your script into. So you don't have to do that in this document necessarily, but you can. It's something that I have done in the past, and so it's just helpful to keep things that you might need in the future or you might need to reference back to in the future, but you don't necessarily have to keep in your script. And usually if I'm using it as a reference, I hardly ever have to come back to it. Either I come up with something that's a lot better than what I had written before, or I just forget about that extra bit of story that I just didn't need anymore, but I kept so that, just in case. So it's really just a just in case section. So I encourage everybody to have a system in which they are able to develop ideas. Now, it's very easy to just have an idea and then think that you can just mull it over in your head and that somehow that's going to make it a reality when you're ready to write. I don't know how many people are able to do such a thing, but from what I understand, and from what I understand of my own process, is that it's all about taking these incremental steps towards the final product, towards the final form of whatever the idea is. And having a document like this is a great way to do simple steps, small steps towards that bigger goal. So if you start with just a title, or if you start with what the genre is, or if you start with what the format is, or if you start with a log line, you're already 10 steps ahead of somebody who is just jotting something down in a notebook and amongst other ideas that are undefined, and it's a way to just kind of like organize everything. So if you like this idea, feel free to try it and let me know what you think. If it's worked for you, if it's helped to focus what's in your head to a more defined form that can eventually be a screenplay. I've used this method many, many times. It has helped me so much to just quickly put down an idea, and even if I don't touch it for a number of months, I can still come back to it, and I know exactly what it is I was trying to do, what the format was, what kind of genre it was. I can jump right back into it without having to spend a lot of brain power figuring out what the past me was thinking. So anyway, that's it for this episode, and I hope everybody's being safe, and I'll talk to you on the next one. Bye.